National Review is a semi-monthly magazine founded by author William F. Buckley, Jr. in 1955 and based in New York. It describes itself as America's most widely read and influential magazine and website for conservative news, commentary, and opinion, although the print version of the magazine is available online to subscribers. The free content on the website is essentially a separate publication under different editorial direction. History. Background. Prior to National Review's founding in 1955, some conservatives believed that the American right was a largely unorganized collection of people who shared intertwining philosophies but had little opportunity for a united public voice. They also wanted to marginalize what they saw as the anti-war, non-interventionistic views of the old right. In 1953, moderate Republican Dwight D. Eisenhower was president, and many major magazines such as the Saturday Evening Post, Time, and Reader's Digest were strongly conservative and anti-communist, as were many newspapers including the Chicago Tribune and St. Louis Globe-Democrat. A few small circulation conservative magazines, Human Events and The Freeman, preceded National Review in developing Cold War conservatism in the 1950s. Early years. In 1953, Russell Kirk published The Conservative Mind, which sought to trace an intellectual bloodline from Edmund Burke to the old right in the early 1950s. This challenged the popular notion that no coherent conservative tradition existed in the United States. A young William F. Buckley, Jr., was greatly influenced by Kirk's concepts. Buckley, from a wealthy oil family, first tried to purchase Human Events, but was turned down. He then met Willie Schlamb, the experienced editor of The Freeman. They would spend the next 2 years raising the $300,000 necessary to start their own weekly magazine, originally to be called National Weekly. The statement of intentions read, "Middle of the road, qua middle of the road, is politically, intellectually, and morally repugnant. We shall recommend policies for the simple reason that we consider them right, and we consider them right because they are based on principles we deem right. The New Deal revolution, for instance, could hardly have happened save for the cumulative impact of The Nation and The New Republic, and a few other publications, on several American college generations during the 20s and 30s. Contributors." On November 19, 1955, Buckley's magazine began to take shape. Buckley assembled an eclectic group of writers, traditionalists, Catholic intellectuals, libertarians and ex-communists. They included Russell Kirk, James Burnham, Frank Meyer and Wilmore Kendall, and Catholics L. Brent Bozell, Harry V. Jaffa and Gary Wills. Whittaker Chambers, the former Time editor who had been a communist spy in the 1930s, eventually became a senior editor. In the magazine's founding statement, Buckley wrote, "Let's face it. Unlike Vienna, it seems altogether possible that did National Review not exist, no one would have invented it. The launching of a conservative weekly journal of opinion in a country widely assumed to be a bastion of conservatism at first glance looks like a work of supererogation, rather like publishing a royalist weekly within the walls of Buckingham Palace. It is not that, of course. If National Review is superfluous, it is so for very different reasons. It stands athwart history, yelling stop, at a time when no other is inclined to do so, or to have much patience with those who so urge it." As editors and contributors, Buckley especially sought out intellectuals who were ex-communists or had once worked on the far left, including Whittaker Chambers, William Schlamb, John Dos Passos, Frank Meyer and James Burnham. When James Burnham became one of the original senior editors, he urged the adoption of a more pragmatic editorial position that would extend the influence of the magazine toward the political center. Smant finds that Burnham overcame sometimes heated opposition from other members of the editorial board, and had a significant effect on both the editorial policy of the magazine and on the thinking of Buckley himself. Mission to Conservatives. National Review aimed to make conservative ideas respectable. In an age when the dominant view of conservative thought was expressed by Lionel Trilling in 1950. In the United States at this time, liberalism is not only the dominant but even the sole intellectual tradition. For it is the plain fact that nowadays there are no conservative or reactionary ideas in general circulation. The conservative impulse and the reactionary impulse do not express themselves in ideas but only in irritable mental gestures which seek to resemble ideas. William Buckley, Jr. On the purpose of National Review. National Review stands athwart history, yelling stop, at a time when no one is inclined to do so, or to have much patience with those who so urge it. It is out of place because, in its maturity, literate America rejected conservatism in favor of radical social experimentation. Since ideas rule the world, the ideologues, having won over the intellectual class, simply walked in and started to run just about everything. There never was an age of conformity quite like this one, or a camaraderie quite like the liberals. National Review promoted Barry Goldwater heavily during the early 1960s. Buckley and others involved with the magazine took a major role in the draft Goldwater movement in 1960 and the 1964 presidential campaign. National Review spread his vision of conservatism throughout the country. The early National Review faced occasional defections from both left and right. Gary Wills broke with NR and became a liberal commentator. Buckley's brother-in-law, Brent Bozell Jr., who stroked the conscience of a conservative for Barry Goldwater, left and started the short-lived traditionalist Catholic magazine, Triumph, in 1966. Defining the boundaries of conservatism, Buckley and Meyer promoted the idea of enlarging the boundaries of conservatism through fusionism, whereby different schools of conservatives, including libertarians, would work together to combat what were seen as their common opponents. Buckley and his editors used his magazine to define the boundaries of conservatism, and to exclude people or ideas or groups they considered unworthy of the conservative title. Therefore they attacked the John Birch Society, George Wallace, and anti-Semites. Buckley's goal was to increase the respectability of the conservative movement. As Rich Lowry noted, Mr. Buckley's first great achievement was to purge the American right of its kooks. He marginalized the anti-Semites, the John Birches, the nativists and their sort. In 1957 NR editorialized in favor of white leadership in the South, arguing that the central question that emerges is whether the white community in the South is entitled to take such measures as are necessary to prevail, politically and culturally, in areas where it does not predominate numerically. The sobering answer is yes. The white community is so entitled because, for the time being, it is the advanced race. By the 1970s NR advocated colorblind policies and the end of affirmative action. In the late 1960s, the magazine attacked segregationist George Wallace, who ran in Democratic primaries in 1964 and 1972 and made an independent run for president in 1968. During the 1950s, Buckley had worked to remove anti-Semitism from the conservative movement and banned holders of those views from working for NR. In 1962, Buckley denounced Robert W. Welch, Jr., and the John Birch Society as far removed from common sense, and urged the GOP to purge itself of Welch's influence. After Goldwater was defeated by Lyndon Johnson in 1964, Buckley and National Review continued to champion the idea of a conservative movement, which was increasingly embodied in Ronald Reagan. Reagan, a longtime subscriber to National Review, first became politically prominent during Goldwater's campaign. National Review supported his challenge to President Gerald Ford in 1976 and his successful 1980 campaign. During the 1980s NR called for tax cuts, supply-side economics, the Strategic Defense Initiative, and support for President Reagan's foreign policy against the Soviet Union. The magazine criticized the welfare state and would support the welfare reform proposals of the 1990s. The magazine also regularly criticized President Bill Clinton. It first embraced, then rejected, Pat Buchanan in his political campaigns. A lengthy 1996 National Review editorial called for a movement toward drug legalization. Political views. Victor Davis Hanson, a regular contributor since 2001, sees a broad spectrum of conservative, anti-liberal contributors. In other words, a wide conservative spectrum: paleoconservatives, neoconservatives, Tea Party enthusiasts, the deeply religious and the agnostic, both libertarians and social conservatives, free marketeers and the more protectionist, characterizes National Review. The common requisite is that they present their views as a critique of prevailing liberal orthodoxy, but do so analytically and with decency and respect. The magazine has been described as the Bible of American conservatism. National Review Online. A popular feature of National Review is the web version of the magazine, National Review Online, which includes a digital version of the magazine, with articles updated daily by National Review writers, and conservative blogs. The online version is called NRO. To distinguish it from the paper magazine, the site's editor is Catherine Jean Lopez, known to the NRO community as KLO. The website receives about 1 million hits per day, more than all other conservative magazine websites combined. Each day, the site posts new content consisting of conservative, libertarian, neoconservative, and neoliberal opinion articles. It also features several blogs: The Corner, The Campaign Spot, David Calling, Bench Memos, The Agenda, Media Blog, Planet Gore, Phi Beta Cons. Marcos Mulosas, who runs the liberal Daily Kos website, told reporters in August 2007 that he does not read conservative blogs, with the exception of those on NRO. "I do like the blogs at the National Review. I do think their writers are the best in the conservative blogosphere," he said. National Review Institute. The NRI works in policy development and helping establish new advocates in the conservative movement. National Review Institute was founded by William F. Buckley, Jr. in 1991 to engage in policy development, public education, and advocacy that would advance the conservative principles he championed. Finances. As with most political opinion magazines in the United States, National Review carries little corporate advertising. The magazine stays afloat by donations from subscribers and black tie fundraisers around the country. The magazine also sponsors cruises featuring National Review editors and contributors as lecturers. Buckley said in 2005 that the magazine had lost about $25 million over 50 years. Presidential primary endorsements. National Review sometimes endorses a candidate during the primary election season. Editors at National Review have said, "Our guiding principle has always been to select the most conservative viable candidate." This statement echoes what has come to be called the Buckley Rule. In a 1967 interview, in which he was asked about the choice of presidential candidate, Buckley said, "The wisest choice would be the one who would win. I'd be for the most right, viable candidate who could win." The following candidates were officially endorsed by National Review editors and contributors. The magazine's current editor is Rich Lowry. Many of the magazine's commentators are affiliated with think tanks such as the Heritage Foundation and American Enterprise Institute. Prominent guest authors have included Newt Gingrich, Mitt Romney, and Sarah Palin in the online and paper edition. Notable current contributors: current and past contributors to National Review magazine, National Review Online, or both: Jed Babin, Bruce Bartlett, Myrna Blythe, Dennis Boyles, Richard Brookhiser, Senior Editor, Mona Charin, Robert Costa, Dinesh D'Souza, Jack Dunphy, David Fredoso, John Fund, NRO, National Affairs columnist, Roman Genn, Jim Geraghty, The Campaign Spot, Jonah Goldberg, NRO, Editor-at-Large, Mark M. Goldblatt, Michael Graham, Victor Davis Hanson, Jeffrey Hart, N.R., Senior Editor, Paul Johnson, Phil Kirpin, NRO, Financial Contributing Editor, Roger Kimball, Florence King, Dave Koppel, NRO, Columnist, Charles Krauthammer, Larry Kudlow, NRO, Economics Editor, Stanley Kurtz, Michael Ledeen, Mark Levin, NRO, Contributing Editor, Syndicated Radio Talk Show Host, James Lilix, Rob Long, N.R., Contributing Editor, Catherine Jean Lopez, NRO, Editor, Rich Lowry, N.R., Editor, Donald Luskin, NRO, Financial Contributing Editor, Michelle Malkin, Jim Manzi, Clifford May, Andrew C. McCarthy, John J. Miller N.R., National Political Reporter, Stephen Moore, Financial Columnist, D. Roy Murdoch, J. Nordlinger, Michael Novak, Kate O'Brien, Washington, D.C., Editor, John O'Sullivan, N.R., Editor-at-Large, Ramesh Ponnuru, Dennis Prager, David Price Jones, David B. Rivkin, James S. Robbins, Claudia Rossett, Pat Sargic, Ria Hansalam, Joseph Morrison Skelly, Thomas Sowell, Stephen Spriel, Jim Talent, former senator from Missouri, Catherine Timpf, George F. Will, Kevin D. Williamson, roving correspondent at National Review, R.V. Young. Notable past contributors Renata Edler, Steve Allen, Wick Allison, W. H. Auden, Edward C. Banfield, Jacques Barzoon, Peter L. Berger, Alan Bloom, George Borges, Robert Bork, L. Brent Bozell, Jr., Peter Brimelow, Pat Buchanan, Christopher Buckley, William F. Buckley, Jr., Editor-at-Large, Founder, James Burnham, John R. Chamberlain, Whittaker Chambers, Shannon W. Coffin, Robert Conquest, Ann Coulter, Arlene Crocher, Guy Davenport, John Derbyshire, Joan Didion, John Dos Passos, Rod Dreyer, John Gregory Dunn, Max Eastman, Thomas Fleming, Samuel T. Francis, Milton Friedman, David Frum, Francis Fukuyama, Eugene Genovesa, Paul Gigo, Nathan Glazer, Stuart Goldman, Paul Gottfried, Ethan Gutman, Ernest van den Haak, Henry Hazlitt, Will Herberg, Christopher Hitchens, Harry V. Jaffa, Arthur Jensen, John Keegan, Wilmore Kendall, Hugh Kenner, Russell Kirk, Irving Crystal, Eric von Kuhnelt Ledeen, Fritz Lieber, John Leonard, John Lukacs, Arnold Lunn, Richard Lynn, Alistair McIntyre, Harvey C. Mansfield, Malachi Martin, Frank Meyer, Scott McConnell, Forrest MacDonald, Ludwig von Mises, Alice Leon Motes, Raymond Moley, Thomas Molnar, Charles Murray, Richard Neuhaus, Robert Nisbet, Robert Novak, Michael Oakeshott, Conchaba Cruz O'Brien, Revilo P. Oliver, John O'Sullivan, Thomas Pangle, Isabel Patterson, Ezra Pound, Paul Craig Roberts, Murray Rothbard, William A. Rusher, Publisher, 1957 to 1988, J. Philippe Rushton, Steve Saylor, Catherine Seep, Daniel Seligman, John Simon, Joseph Sobran, Whit Stillman, Theodore Sturgeon, Mark Stain, Thomas SZASZ, Alan Tate, Jared Taylor, Terry G. Chout, Taki Theodora Copulos, Ralph de Toledano, Oberon War, Evelyn War, Richard M. Weaver, Robert Weisberg, Frederick Wilhelmsen, Gary Wills, James Q. Wilson, Tom Wolfe, Byron York, former White House correspondent for National Review, Washington editors L. Brent Bozell, Jr., Neil B. Freeman, George Will, 1973–1976. Neil B. Freeman, 1978–1981. John McLaughlin, 1981–1989. William McGurn, 1989–1992. Kate Obin, Robert Costa, 2012–2013. Eliana Johnson, 2014–present. Bibliography. Allett, Patrick. The Conservatives, Ideas and Personalities Throughout American History. Excerpt and text search. Bogus, Carl T. Buckley, William F. Buckley, Jr., and the Rise of American Conservatism. Critchlow, Donald T. The Conservative Ascendancy. How the Right Made Political History. Frisk, David B. If Not Us, Who? William Rusher, National Review, and the Conservative Movement. Frohnan, Bruce A. Al. eds. American Conservatism, an Encyclopedia. ISBN 1-93223644-9. Hart, Jeffrey. The Making of the American Conservative Mind. The National Review and Its Times. A View from the Inside. Judas, John B. William F. Buckley, Jr., Patron Saint of the Conservatives. ISBN 978-0-7432-1797-2. Nash, George. The Conservative Intellectual Movement in America Since 1945. Schneider, Gregory. The Conservative Century. From Reaction to Revolution. Smant, Kevin J. Principles and Heresies. Frank S. Mayer and the Shaping of the American Conservative Movement.